The time has come. The roster reveal for the Curse of the Vampire Coast, and holy shit, am I excited. So let's just jump into something here right off the bat. I wasn't able to watch the entire roster reveal. I was working alongside, kind of listening. So I do have some notes from the actual video, but for the most part, we're going to be working off of the roster reveal from the blog post. If you didn't get a chance to see all the units in action, I cannot stress enough. Please head on over to Total War Official because they did a whole big stream of it. Whelan nonstop put his hand through his hair, and I found that personally insulting because I have got no hair. But it was great to just kind of hear from the designers on why or how they kind of went with the art direction for their units, and they went into in depth on every single unit. So please go ahead and check that out if you haven't, because I want you guys to see what these models look like. They're so fucking cool. So let's jump in to this entire roster reveal. We'll start with Luther Harkin, the big daddy, the big boy. And for the Lords, we know a lot of what we're getting, right? We know their actual traits from the last week's reveal. So let's kind of go over some stuff. So completely lack spellcasting, which is cool, right? That's lore friendly. We know he's got this scrambled mind from all the Lustrian delving into these temple cities that have completely fractured his brain. So cool with that. To compensate, though, he is highly resistant to magic damage and will also convert this to nearby friendly units. So that is exciting as well. He also has a pistol, which he can fire on the move. I mean, as if that wasn't evident. On top of that, he gets a cool rapier that suggests his splash attack profile should be similar to Sigvald or Wulfric, which is kind of nifty here. And he's got a bit of above average speed. Armored just enough to be considered armored. So it looks like he is a little bit of the anti-mage lord. Has a little bit more of a probably a damage profile about him and less of a defense profile about him. So maybe he can get up close and personal and do some serious damage. I'm not sure if they went exactly into his mounts. I did miss that portion. I was hoping that would say oh, has a special mount of something if he has a mount. But it didn't look like they have it here. I'm sure you guys, if you watched it, please feel free to comment below. Do see if your comment is already made. If we have 15 comments that say, oh, his mount is blank, that's not helpful. Let's all just take the one comment that is the right comment and just upvote that. That way it just kind of stays at the top. Moving on to Count Noctilus here. We obviously see his mount. So he's a caster that comes with a hybrid lore of vampires and shadows. And that's a pretty cool little kit there. So he's relatively slow moving in comparison to the other vampire units. He has a high mass, he's heavily armored, and he's able to regenerate lost hit points. Comes equipped with a polearm as well. So he's an anti-large AP regenning masked armored badass on top of Necrofex Colossus. So I think that just going out on a limb here, because the fact that he is able to regenerate and he is kind of heavily armored and he is anti-large and AP, well, I would hope that this means AP, i.e. Ushabti and Reichsguard. Comes equipped with a polearm. That's never not AP. So I'm just gonna assume, yeah, brutal versus armored and large units. It's I don't even read anymore. So I'm thinking he's going to be one of the most competitive lords. When you look at the lore of Vampire and Shadows, those are two very strong lores. And on top of a Necrofex Colossus, if you can put him on, or however many points it costs to put him on one, it's going to make it so that he is pretty damn dangerous. I'm not sure how regenerating lost hit points works if or when he's on a Necrofex. Well, when he's on a Necrofex. But I'm very curious to see how what this Lord's actual stats are like. It says he's slow, but how slow? Are we talking Helman Gorst slow? Or are we just talking he's not as fast as the rest of the vampires, but still pretty quick? So I guess we got to see what that really means. Now, Aranessa's Assault Bite she's got a little bit different of a little profile here. She's very lithe, she's very acrobatic, she's very athletic. So that has been kind of made into her profile. So she's equipped with a halberd, making her ideal for countering armored and large units again. She's a little bit faster, it seems, than the other lords, as well as having a low HP but above average melee defense. And this is also her base physical resistance is increased because to represent that kind of lithe, agile ability. But she has what seems to be a net of Amontok ability to kind of net things down. And again, sweeping attacks with her halberd. So both Noctilus and Aranessa have the ability to kind of cleave attack, as it were, or so it seems from this text. And what that kind of means damage-wise, we'll see. I could see Aranessa as doing maybe less damage outright, and Noctilus doing more damage, but Aranessa being able to withstand maybe more punishment because she can move in and out of combat quicker, and maybe Noctilus just has the ability to regen and has heavier armor, so he kind of has that, like, that's his, like, all right, well, do you want someone who can sit in the center of the fray forever, or want someone who can move in and out of the attack? And that's what I think the difference is. And it looks like Aranessa here can ride a Promethean, which is all sorts of fucking awesome. Like, look at that, just digging her little swordfish legs deep into the skull. Like, oh man, that is pretty brutal, pretty metal. Then Solastra Direfin, our own custom Lord, Lady, Queen, whatever the hell, from Creative Assembly here, the Sea Witch. Now let's see her abilities. Now, of course, she is ghostly. That gives her a natural resilience to physical attacks, her ethereal attribute. Now, we've seen this represented through a lot of other characters, and it looks like we'll be seeing this a lot in the Curse of the Vampire Coast, because she can summon undead Bretonnian knights. So we'll see how that really kind of plays out. Are these going to be just your typical knights, errant, but we've seen them, they've got an ability to upgrade to other questing knights, not Grail Knights or Knights of the Realm. So I think that's such a really awesome mechanic, and how that's going to be put in from her previous lore, or I'm sorry, her previous entry we got on Friday. Specializes in using songs to control enemy units, movement speed, buff her own units, and damage enemies. So you almost kind of get this Total War bard, right? Someone who can use these spells to buff and hinder and debuff an attack. So I'm really excited to see how that mechanic works, what all of her songs are, how all they work, if they have to be kind of like, I don't want to say channeled, but you click it and it's like a constant buff that turns on. And maybe you have to click another one, and it's like, it's a recast before you can cast the other one, or something like that. Like, you know how you, like, I don't want to say stance dancing, but if you play like any bard in any, like a Baldur's Gate or a Pillars of Eternity, you've got the ability really to kind of alternate your songs. And I wonder if you'll be able to do that with Solastra. Also, we know that she's a powerful caster. We've seen how she's going to have a lot of bonuses to casting. Her recycle rate of spells, her ability to cast spells quickly is going to be really the crux of who she is from Friday's entry. So she'll have access to the lore of the deep exclusively, it looks like. No other lore. No custom kit, which is cool. I mean, this is a brand new lore of the game, so I'm so stoked for them to see this, like, kind of one lore dedicated solely to it, rather than a kind of a custom kit around it. I really like that. Otherwise fairly fragile with little to no armor and mediocre melee defense, which is totally fine if she's got a native resistance to physical attacks. Totally fine. I'm on board with that, especially if she's just kind of like this floating turret of spells and songs. She's going to need to have that kind of counter to her where, okay, well, someone gets close and personal, like I say, escape an assassin, they're going to be able to tear her open. Well, like metaphorically, she's already kind of dead. It makes sense. Moving on. So we've got some hero choices here, or some other lord choices. The Fleet Admirals are lords. These are our heroes. The Fleet Admiral, male or female. The male one is our melee version with access to vampires, death, and deeps. Interestingly enough, no shadow here. I mean, we see that Noctilus has access to shadow, so it looks the Fleet Admirals can't have access to the shadow at all. So if you want that in your armor, you have to take Noctilus. Specializes in combating armored large threats. And dude, these models are so cool looking. They're so cool looking. I don't remember if the vampire counts of Total War Warhammer 1 and 2 had red eyes like they do in this, but just this like very piercing all black eye with like a red iris is so terrifying. It's so like scary looking. Like the red, it's like black eye, red iris, black pupil, and it looks like so intimidating. You get the access to the female version as well, which gives melee missile caster lord. And you can kind of, so this seems like this is going to kind of be like your, for lack of a better word, Empire General. And this is going to be more like your souped up version of a witch hunter, able to pick out characters with pistols while moving in. So, or a pistol. So maybe she's going to have the ability to have like a sword and a pistol, or maybe a handgun, or different kits out for her. But I'm very curious to see how they do these two lords in campaign and what their mechanics are going to be like, because these are custom in the actual tabletop, the fleet captain was a white. It was not a vampire. So it's really cool to see this kind of addition added into the game. Dracula was a vampire. I guess you could say a vampire fleet admiral. It was Count Noctilus's right hand, and he was a vampire, not a white. So that's one of the only mentions we have of these kind of vampire fleet admirals in the game, outside of their actual roster, which when I say in the game, I mean tabletop, because their tabletop roster, again, has them as whites, not as vampires. Now moving over to the fleet captain, just simple, pretty simple hero, hybrid melee caster lord, well, lady, I guess, and hero, therefore, and access to vampire death and deep. So we saw her as well in the roster reveal, this kind of really cool vampire motif. All of them have these cool tricone hats. I think that's really sick. So I like the repeating motif you see along all these characters and how they look so kind of ragtag, but at the same time very distantly regal and really awesome. I'm so stoked on it. Then we have the Gunnery White and the Mourngul Haunter. I unfortunately did not see anything on the Gunnery White. I wasn't paying attention. So it is a support unit. It is going to have strong AP missile attacks. It'll be accurate for a zombie. It also will provide buffs to nearby missile units as well as replenishing ammo for those missile units. If they went into what this means more, please feel free to comment below. I couldn't, unfortunately, catch all of it, but I wanted to get this out to you guys ASAP, and we can have a discourse in the comment section as needed. Now, the Mourngul Haunter is pretty damn scary. He's this big blue version of a normal Mourngul, and normal Mournguls themselves are fucking absolutely terrifying. So, Vanguard deployment, stock, high AP anti-infantry damage, regenerates HP in melee, powerful charge, and large mass. So, I see these guys as kind of like these assassin role characters of the Vampire Coast. You know, you send these Mourngul Haunters in, you try and kind of flank them into, say, another caster lord and just completely delete it. You know, it's got large mass, so it can push through things that would otherwise stop man-sized or small-sized assassins, Skaven assassins, Dark Elf assassins, so on and so forth. So the Mourngul Haunter, depending on how fast it is on the ground and how that stock mechanic really plays out, this could be an absolute terror on the battlefield. Aside from the fact that he's absolutely terrifying looking. It doesn't say if he's got fear or terror in here. I imagine he might have one, if not both, because he's a Mourngul, and Mournguls are absolutely horrific looking. Like, I can't imagine being like looking at one of those and go, yeah, not afraid at all. Totally feeling normal right now. No, fuck no. Let's move into some troops. Oh God. Things are terrifying. Spooky Halloweens. So, zombie pirate deckhand mobs. We see these guys in a number of variants here. So, coming equipped with dual swords. That's kind of a cool little, almost like Nehekar and Warriors. They will sit somewhere between Skeleton Warriors and Empire Swordsmen in the power curve. Okay, so we should expect them to maybe have more melee attack, maybe more armor, maybe less armor. Who knows? But maybe just see them as a slight bump up from a Skeleton Warrior and a slight step down from the Empire Swordsman in stats, I would assume, as well as stat relative to cost. So maybe these guys are priced anywhere from 200 to 500, and they've got like let's just say like a 5 to 10 stat increase on a Skeleton Warrior, or a 5 to 10 stat decrease from an Empire Swordsman. Probably falls along that lines. Then they got the polearm variant, of course. It looks like these guys are just going to be your tar pitting zombie pirates as usual. You know, the zombies that you want to just kind of get in there and hold things down, because it looks like the infantry line for the Vampire Coast is going to be very tar pitty. You want to get up close and personal with these zombies, weigh things down, use your big scary monsters to push in through the zombies and do the damage. Is probably what the crux of the army is going to be about. So of course polearms, strong versus armored and large targets, you know, as to be expected. Now the zombie pirate gunnery mob comes in a lot of different variants. So we've got the pistol and sword variant. This is the basic unit. We've got the rifle variant, so your handgunner type variant. Not necessarily an upgrade to the initial gunnery mob. This unit is more of a side grade, able to lay down punishing firepower, more so than the basic gunnery mob. So they can't move and fire like the gunnery mob can, but they have a longer range accuracy and stopping power. So that is something to note, that these guys, the gunnery mob, can fire on the move. So that's going to be terrifying to see. I don't know if these guys are going to be AP or not. I mean, it's pistols, it's gunpowder. I mean, and we typically see that as AP. So It doesn't outright say in these things like, oh, this thing has armor piercing. So we'll see how that kind of plays out. Then, of course, you have another one, and another two, actually, the hand cannon. This is a side grade, but this time with the rifle-equipped gunnery mob. Instead of firing a solid shot, their weapons function more like a blunderbuss. So probably a much shorter range, an anti-infantry, not penalty, but bonus to it. The weapon will have significant knockback, giving the player a tool for disrupting enemy charges. That's pretty damn cool here. On top of it, you have a bomber unit, so you've got just something like your dwarf miners with satchel charges, I imagine. This unit will excel when throwing bombs into a melee. Most Vampire Coast units are fodder, thus when the inevitable friendly fire occurs, the enemy is likely to have lost more than the player. So, I don't know if these guys are going to function like we see the satchel charges of dwarf miners, or more like the globadiers of the Skaven, which are, yeah, sure, those things are supposed to be like little grenades, but they don't really like knock things down, you know, like the satchel charges do. So I'm very curious to see how that's going to play out. But moving to my favorite unit in the roster from that roster reveal, this is the one that I zoned in on. I was like, oh, Depth Guard, I must hear more. And the Depth Guard are some of the most beautiful units I've seen in, not only in Total War Warhammer, but in the tabletop version thereof. Like, these guys look exactly like I want a vampire to look like. Very regal, very ornate armor. Very terrifying looking, right? These guys are your only kind of sturdy infantry, it looks like, in the entire roster. Everything else looks like it's either going to be your zombies or monstrous creatures. But the Death Guard seem to be that kind of sturdy main line here. And this unit of heavy infantry will come equipped with this is interesting, instead, with a sword and a hook hand. In the stream, I believe they said they had dual axes. So I think, I don't know if maybe there's an upgrade of the Death Guard that's not on here, that does have the dual weapons or something like that, or if this is implied dual weapons. I'm not really sure, but in the actual stream they said dual axes, so I guess we'll see what that means. But it says that they're slightly less durable than Graveguard, but they do more damage, and they are all vampires too. So that is awesome. Like, that is so cool. I mean, the Graveguard we know are reanimated. They're essentially wights. The Tomb Guard we know are basically just your veteran Hekaran warriors of some sort. The Depth Guard, though, are all vampires. So I imagine these guys, they said that they are a smaller unit count even than Chosen. So probably something, there's a smaller, more elite unit that's got maybe better combat stats than the other guards, but just isn't as durable, especially because, you know, they lack a shield. So that definitely is going to make them vulnerable to missile fire. Now, the side grade, of course, is the Polearm variant. And these guys are, of course, going to be anti-large AP, as to be expected. But we'll see what this really means as far as their capabilities in the game. It just kind of pretty much talks about them like defending war machines and stuff like that. We didn't see these Depth Guard on the stream. We only saw these Depth Guard. The Depth Guard with, I guess, 2 weapons was talked about. So that's why I'm saying, well, they said they have 2 axes. So we'll see what actually comes out when the game launches. In addition, we have Scurvy Dogs. These guys are just strictly direwolves. They look a lot greener and cooler, more nautical flavor, as they called it. Now, Sirens. This is something very different here. The Sirens are a unit in Total War Warhammer, not a hero choice like they are in the tabletop. The Siren has a kind of enthralling, charming ability in tabletop to kind of charm units, as you know, a Siren would. But it's relatively fast moving. It's near immune to physical damage, deals magic damage, and vulnerable to magic damage as well, obviously because it is ethereal and it deals AP damage. And now we saw this as a big, huge unit of banshees, but with a blue kind of sheen to them. So I'm very curious to see how this kind of plays out, and with what their kind of combat role is going to be. I mean, we've seen ethereal units used throughout Total War Warhammer 1, and they've been kind of lackluster. Cairn Wraiths, Hex Wraiths, I couldn't think of the other one. Even Banshees in and of themselves, they all don't really get much play. And I really hope that these ethereal units from Solastra, from the Sirens themselves, are just a little bit better, I guess you could say. And they actually make me want to choose them. I think I'd want to choose them because my other alternative here is like zombies. So I might want to, just because they deal AP. You know, maybe that's going to be the only way I crack open dwarfs, because I'm not sure, you know, what the cost is of a Cyrene versus a Depth Guard. And if these Depth Guard pole arms are going to be my only option as far as infantry units, outside of my zombies with pole arms to crack open dwarfs, maybe Cyrenes is where I go, because they'll be immune to physical damage and they'll deal AP damage. So that would be a really great kind of dwarf cracker, right? Or heavily armored cracker. But we'll kind of see, I guess, how they play out. Fellbats, no real difference here. Normal old Fellbats. Now, the deck droppers were not showcased much in, I think they were just mentioned in the stream. But the deck droppers here are straight out of the tabletop. They're these kind of flying missile cav here that we see. They come equipped with rifles, but you have variations of them as well. So the deck dropper has a bomber that you can use here instead. And this operates similar to the Barrel Bomber, or Pterodon Riders. We were basically just dropping bombs from them. So you either have a rifle, as you can see in this, or a bomb to drop, and that's going to be pretty damn sick. It depends, I guess, how effective this can be. Bomber units are always really cool in theory, but I feel like they just never get off the ground, and that's no pun intended there. Pterodon Riders with bombs have very niche matchups that, I mean, they're pretty costly by comparison. They're about 1,000 points. And so choosing Pterodon Riders with Firebolas tend to not really be as good as choosing something else that was either equivalently 1,000 points or slightly more than, so you do get more use out of it. If you're taking a look at like even the Frostheart Phoenix, or I'm sorry, the Flamespire Phoenix, you don't get a ton of use from it. Even Gyro Bombers don't really see much use in competitive play. So I'd love to see these bombers actually being worth their point value, I guess you could say. We've got deck gunners coming in small numbers. These weapon teams are slow and vulnerable in melee, long range, armor piercing, the shield breaker contact effect. So that's something that we've seen introduced in Total War, or I'm sorry, in the Rise of the Tomb Kings. And we're going to see this kind of introduced here as well in Curse of the Vampire Coast. They can pierce multiple entities as well. These deck gunners are straight out of the tabletop as well. We kind of see them as like a two-man team in tabletop, very similar to our Warplock Jezzail, so hopefully that kind of spells good things for Warplock Skaven Warplock Jezzails in the future. Apologies, guys, my allergies are really kicking into full gear here now. It's like super windy in Southern California, and that just means the death of me. Even Turn is sick, so it's just like all of us are falling apart. Then we have our Carronade. Now this is basically a cannon. This artillery unit functions much like the Empire and Dwarf cannons, providing long-range anti-large firepower. But this unit may be given dual ammo functionality, similar to the Elf Bolt Throwers. So that's really sick, right? We either get a solid shot or a grape shot. We can focus on being anti-infantry or being on anti-large. And that's so sick. It's just like straight off the ship, you know? The only thing missing from this would be like a grape shot variant. Or I'm sorry, a chain shot variant, and that maybe damages the sails. Wait, damages the sails? Never mind. That would be for naval combat. Moving, of course, laterally to that, we have the mortar, and this functions, of course, just like the Empire one, with two different types of functionality as well: explosive or quicklime. So this one is really better used against light armor. So if you're fighting against your greenskins, if you're fighting against your Skaven or Beastmen, large hordes of light armor, the mortar is going to be a little bit more ideal. Whereas the Carronade is going to be better focused at things that can field large creatures like Norska, again, Beastmen, even any of the elf factions who have access to all their treemen and or their dragons, so stuff like that. So, and of course the grape shot is going to be probably AP alongside it, right? I mean, you've got a cannon, so I would hope so. But we'll see how that kind of plays out. So I would assume anti-large AP, anti-infantry AP, explosive anti-infantry, quicklime. I don't think I remember exactly what how that works. Now, Bloated Corpses are unique amongst all rosters here. This is a self-destructing solo unit. In the tabletop, I believe it was the same way. So they have above average speed for the roster, and they'll explode upon contact with the enemy or when the HP falls below a certain threshold. So they're kind of like a ticking time bomb in your own units or used against the enemy here. So I'm really stoked to see how much massive damage this is. Because if it's like, okay, against like a unit of Norskin Marauders, maybe it's like deletes a unit. Okay, that's cool. But if it's like a unit against like Chosen and it really does like just cracks the shield barely, Bloated Corpses might not be as cool as I thought. Like maybe they're going to be better against horde factions and smaller factions with factions with lighter armor. So It does say bunched up infantry, so I would think like a horde faction like a Skaven would probably benefit from using the bloated corpses against versus, say, again, Chaos or maybe even High Elves. So then we have the terrifying Morgul. That's the Morgul Haunter right there, the bigger, bluer variant of this. Good God, look at the depth guard. See the depth guard here? 2 axes, guys. 2 axes. God, that's so fucking cool. Oh, I gotta catch my breath. So these guys, of course, have Vanguard deployment and Stocko as well. So again, these guys are going to be a bit of a hunter in the night. Not that Morgul Haunter and Hunter doesn't make sense. But above average movement speed and exceptionally fast charge speed. So looks like they can close that distance quickly. Maybe they're there to kind of harass and shut down any kind of cavalry, or I'm sorry, harassment cav or fast cav, resistant to physical damage, but otherwise fairly fragile for their unit category. And they also deal substantial AP damage in melee. So it says possibly anti-infantry. Maybe they're working on that as a balance factor, but maybe these guys are going to be your way to crack open dwarves or heavy armored factions like the High Elves or the Dark Elves and stuff like that. Also, regenerate HP in combat due to their hunger ability, which is huge. Now, the animated Hulks, I think that they're up here. I'm going to show them real quick. Sorry for jumping around here. Could have swore I saw something on. Yeah, animated Hulks right there. Boop, 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 boop. And the animated Hulkster talks about them being ogres in the lore. So that kind of makes sense. You know, this is the first heavy unit available to the Vampire Coast. They get access to these probably pretty quick. And they're primarily there to screen for missile units absorbing damage and dealing high raw damage to enemy units in melee. All the things that the kind of base infantry of the Vampire Coast would need. You know, something to kind of screen for them, something to kind of push home a high mass advantage. And being, you know, part ogre, yes, that would kind of drive it home. Maybe this could be the template for what we see for the Ogre Kingdoms in the future, or maybe Chaos Ogres added to the Ogre line. I'm sorry, to the Chaos line. So keep a close eye at these models, because they might pose some future results for some Ogres added to the game. You know, I mean, since they are lore-wise, quote-unquote, historically, Ogres. So the Rotting Prometheans. Now, a lot of you guys debated me on saying whether or not this was a Rotting Leviathan or not. Looks like I win this one. You know who the hell you are. So the Rotting Prometheans look like to be a smaller size variant of the Leviathan. I don't know if that's Leviathan or not, to be honest, or if that's Leviathan, or if this is all it. But a significant upgrade to the animated Hulks, high mass, high armor, relatively slow, resistant to missile attacks, and charge defense versus large. And they have 2 variants, right? They've got this one. They kind of have like these, I guess you could call them Hadabs in the back, with the little guys on their little zombie deckhands. But they have a gunnery mob variant, which is armed with hand cannons. So that is going to be pretty gnarly to see. And I'm really stoked to see how these guys kind of operate on the battlefield. If they're going to be able to screen out fast cav. I mean, like it says they're relatively slow. So are they going to be able to absorb the charge of more elite cav? Or are they going to be there to kind of hunt down fast cav with their hand cannons? Or how it really is going to work for them? I'm really stoked to see these guys. Now, the Rotting Leviathan, they went into a lot of detail and talk about how they actually made the model of this guy. In the lore, the Rotting Leviathan is talked about as being a sea drake or a Promethean, a bunch of different types of... Kraken was one of them. So Rotting Leviathan in the lore could be any number of things. And so they went with a kind of a double crab here. They said that it's got the head of a different crab and the back of a different crab. So they took a whole different approach to these guys. And I think they're so sick. They're talking about how the teeth themselves are individually animated. Like, holy crap, man. Like this model in and of itself is amazing. And you have like the zombies on their little crow's nest and everything. Like, so extremely high armor, high AP, high mass, high missile resistance, charge defense versus all, armor piercing melee attacks. This unit also comes equipped with several riders armed with rifles, providing some massive or some passive AP missile power. So really, really stoked on these guys here. They're a big whole new custom animation for them, so you can kind of get a really good sense for how fucking awesome they look if you watch the stream. The Necrofex Colossus here, the Optimus Prime of the Vampire Counts, or Vampire Coast. 4 cannons strapped together. Like, holy crap. Like, if it has the same sound as it does in Transformers, I'm leaving. I love that fucking movie. I don't care about you guys. If you don't like watching the eye porn that is the Transformers movie, who cares about plot? I just want to watch robots in disguise just scissor each other on top of the Empire State Building. So Necrofex Colossus here, 4 cannons strapped together, heavy firepower, able to move and fire, rarely has line of sight blocked, hybrid range melee unit, so interesting enough, and 5 riders equipped with rifles on top, and it's able to summon up a unit of zombie deckhands. Damn. Those might be an auto pick depending on how much they cost. Like, I'm very curious on what the Rhine Leviathan and the Necrofex Colossus are going to cost point-wise for Total War Warhammer 2 in the competitive realm. When you look at stuff like Norska, you think of their mammoths and how, man, I really want to pick a mammoth. But if you're trying to be competitive, you almost never ever pick the mammoth. It's such a weak choice by comparison. It's like 2,200 points, 2,000 points, 1,800 I think for just the base one. I can't remember. But at the same time, you just don't get much return out of it. So I'm kind of scared that these guys are going to be so cool sounding on paper, but when it comes to the actual game, they're going to be like, I don't know, like 1,800 or 3,000 points, heaven forbid, depending on how, like, this thing sounds like a 3,000 point monster. And it's just not going to do the amount of damage that would equal its point value. So I am always scared and always super excited on large creatures because I want them to be the super awesome thing that you bring to the battlefield, but it's the same thing that the 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy suffered from. Large creatures like dragons can get deleted with one shot of a cannonball if they roll right. So you do kind of have to weigh, you know, it's that pros and cons when you weigh in those kind of pros and cons versus taking this large creature versus this army, so on and so forth. Deathstreak Terrorgeist here, same thing as a Vampire Counts Terrorgeist, nothing new there. And lastly, the Queen Bess's Cannon. We've seen this teased so many times. Enormous range, fires in a parabolic arc, monstrous impact, contact effect, causes movement penalties to target, slow reload speed, and enormous blast damage from impacts. Oh, man. Don't know how much she's going to cost, but I cannot wait to try her. I will bring her in every single competitive match until I find a way to make her work, because it's so sick to see this included into the game. In the tabletop, it has this monstrous model. I think they even talked about it being relatively huge in Total War Warhammer 2, but we've seen some of its firepower in the trailers before. I didn't get a chance to watch the very end of the stream to see this bad bitch in action, but hopefully you guys did, and you can tell me whether or not it's awesome or not. But guys, I'm so excited for Vampire Coast. This video ended up being a lot longer than I wanted it to be, but I don't think you can tell how excited I am for this shit. So, as always, don't forget to comment below. Let me know what your thoughts were about the roster reveal and what you liked or disliked about things. Always happy to get into a discourse with y'all. But as always, guys, thanks so much for watching. We got a Red Duke video coming out for you tomorrow. Drakenfels is coming out. Stromfels, Manon, we got videos on all of them coming out as well. Head-to-head campaign with Turin, as well as our Volkmar's Crusade campaign. So, plenty to do here, guys. Hang tight, plenty around the corner. But have a good one and take care.